we all art reflects our world back at us, but I think sometimes like pop culture escape art reflects it back at us in a way that like lets us have some fun too.
Lounging, son.
All right, welcome back to the Comic Lounge. My name's Ryan, and today I have a man that needs no introduction. Ed Brubaker, my favorite writer in comic books. I mean, you know him from Daredevil, Batman, all the criminal stuff, all his stuff with Sean Phillips, Fatal. Pulp just came out this year. The latest Criminal volume finished, and now we have Reckless, which has already become one of my favorites. Welcome, Ed. How's it going?
Hey, thanks for having me.
First off, just want to ask how you've been doing these past few months, and what during the shit show over here that we're.
Yeah, it's been really productive. Strangely, I didn't expect. Like all of us, it's like this roller coaster ride of like up and down, and oh, are we opening back up? Oh, is the election finally over? Like it's just this constant roller coaster of 2020. I think because I had Friday coming out like right after the pandemic lockdown started, I just felt like, and Sean was working on the story we wrote for the Parker book that's coming out next year. And I just kind of felt like those were the only things in my life, like my work part of it was really the things in my life that I felt like worth getting up for every day. Cause we're stuck at home, we're, terrified to interact with other people. And, every time you go to any store, you like worry for 5 days afterwards or 2 weeks afterwards if you got sick. Like it's insane to be living through this. So it's like getting up every morning and just writing stories became this, like I looked forward to it more than probably I had in, a decade. Like I just felt like, first off, lucky to have that kind of career that I could just get up every day and keep working my job.
Right.
Like I never felt more like I loved comics more than when like every comic store in the country was shut down. I was like, no.
Yeah. I totally get it. I mean, I told you when we talked a couple days ago, I work at a comic book store, so not being there for a few months and then like going back to work and just like looking around at the comics on the shelves, I was like, oh my God, yeah. Like I breathed like this sigh of relief. Like I was back in a comic book store, because
like Sean and I had just literally sent pulp to the printer the day that Diamond shut down and the printer shut down. Like, so we had like been killing ourselves to hit this deadline. And then the day we like up until like 3 days before, I'm like, are comic stores even going to be open? And our publisher was like, yeah, sure. They're as far as we know. And then like literally the day we were going to the print, it was like, oh no, everything's on hold. Like that just felt really weird because and then you're looking at everybody putting their stuff on Kickstarter because people are like, I don't know if there's going to be a comic market. Mm-hmm. And so I was just like, I don't know what to do. And the only thing I could do was just get up every day and write. That was like the only part of my life that I could control. And I knew Sean wasn't going to stop wanting pages to draw. That's right. We've been doing this for 20 years now. Like this is what we do. So it just, it became incredibly productive. And I realized just the other day, like this is the first year, like right before the pandemic lockdown started, Sean went on like a 2-week vacation to like the Canary Islands or something, and ran into like Ian Rankin and Mark Miller and a bunch of people apparently. And I think Jock was there. It was like a bunch of Brits who like were going for their sort of spring holiday. And I remember emailing Sean, like, don't get that COVID thing that everyone's talking about. And then it literally like a month later, everybody in the world was canceling flights everywhere. And, so Sean normally takes several like trips during the year to other places in Europe. And he hasn't been able to do that this year. So we've gotten even more work done than usual.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say like, I was pretty shocked when I heard Reckless was coming out. I could have played like first of all, I love hardcovers. So I buy all the issues of everything you guys do. And then every time you drop a hardcover, I pick those up. And I'm very stoked, by the way, side note, that you guys re-released Criminal 1, the hardcover of 1 and 2, because it's like comical on eBay. And I wanted those for my, for my bookshelf. Because when it goes from soft cover to hardcover, it bothers me. So Yeah, but so I'm very stoked those are coming out, and then I'll just jump right in it. Let's talk about
Oh,
Red.
yeah, sure.
I loved the book. I thought it was fantastic. My manager at the shop and we kind of joke like, when people ask what's your favorite Brubaker Phillips book, and it's our answer usually is whatever last came out. Because
Yeah.
whatever we just read, that's our favorite.
Yeah. Mine is always whatever the next one's going to be that I haven't fucked up yet.
So I wanted to ask, like, where did this idea for a new original graphic novel line come from?
It happened kind of fast. Like, Sean was, we were gearing up to start like another monthly comic that was going to be, I think we were going to have like the cover of the catalog maybe or something, or the front of the image section, which we ended up getting for Reckless anyway. But we were going to do like a monthly comic, and it was kind of a heavy topic. It was like, I don't want to spoil it because we might do it again later. But it felt kind of like out there for us. It was like a little bit of a different kind of genre for us to go in, a little bit of espionage, but a little bit of like historical fiction mixed with like fantasy. And it just, but a lot of it was about kind of processing, like, how do you get past this world that we're living in now? And it was like a way to sort of take that to like another world and do like a story that would essentially be like a crime story or an espionage story, but had these kind of themes of like what I feel like, not just our society, but like societies all over the world are struggling with right now, because, the times are changing and global warming is making resources more scarce. But I was starting to work on that as Sean was sending in pages for the Parker story we did. And as I was looking at those, it made me go back and like reread all of Darwin's Parker graphic novel adaptations. And at that same time, like as I was reading those, I found myself like reading some of the Parker books and reading some like old Ross McDonald, Lou Archer books. And I'd never really read Travis McGee before, who was one of my dad's favorite series characters, the John D. McDonald series. So I picked up like that entire series. It's like 25 books or something, because I wanted to read from the beginning to the end, like my dad had as they were being published. And when I was doing research about it, I found out that like John D. McDonald was like a really popular writer, but he hadn't done a series character, and one of his editor friends was bugging him to do a series character. And so he wrote the first 3 books in a row over the course of like 6 or 7 months, just to see if he could do it before he let them be published, because he wasn't sure if he wanted to do a series character or if he could write the kind of stories he wanted to write. And he was like really successful. Like Cape Fear is based on one of his books. So the first Travis McGee books were published like 2 months apart, like the first book, and then a couple months later the second book, and then a couple months later the third book, and they were like instant, worldwide sensation. And so as I was like reading those early books, I was just sort of thinking about like the lurid covers of like all those like pulp characters from the 60s and 70s, like the Destroyer or the Executioner or the Penetrator. Like they all had these like, they were all these ridiculous characters who, white men getting vengeance. The Punisher is like a riff on those characters. And I just started, like, I've always been in love with like series characters. If I like read a detective novel and really like dig it, I'll end up reading like every book by that author with that character. Like it's just, it's a comic book thing. Like you like Spider-Man, you read Spider-Man even when someone shitty is writing Spider-Man.
Yeah.
No offense to whoever's writing Spider-Man. But like it's a very, like I have that collector mentality. So I was like kind of obsessively reading these books and thinking about that genre again as I was like gearing up to start writing this thing for Sean. And I just felt like I didn't want to do the monthly comic. Like for one thing, I had no idea like our comic stores even going to be open in August when this thing was going to, start. And I had talked to my publisher, and he suggested that Sean and I do like some short stories that we could release like digitally. And then when the market was back open, we could put them out as a graphic novel. And I started thinking about that and trying to figure out some way to create some interlinked short stories that would basically be a novel. And as I was doing that, I was reading all these old pulp novels, and I just, like, I had this kind of revelatory moment when I was looking at all that and then looking at Darwin's graphic novels, and I just thought, no one's done this. Like, no one's done like a series character that's like an original. Like, Darwin's thing was adapting books, which were, you know, really well known around the world, and he did this amazing thing, and I just thought no one had tried to do that with like an original character in comics. Whereas if you're, whenever you're in the airport, like whatever Hudson News or books, whatever bookstores there, like the front rack is all like these series characters, like anything John Sanford writes or the Reacher books, or, you know, there's like these characters, and they come out and they put out one book every year with this, you know, whatever the main character is, and people just buy those and read them on the plane and like leave them in the seat or whatever. But it's just like, it's all just an extension of the like original days of pulp fiction, from like The Shadow and Doc Savage and Sherlock Holmes. It's like it's all this long continuum. And I just thought at some point comics latched onto those kind of characters, but they all wear costumes. And it's like superhero fiction is the same thing. It's serialized fiction. And I just was like, what if I do, like, Sean and I have never really done like a straight hero character. What would our version of a hero be? And of course he's not that like super heroic or anything, but I just kind of like fell in love with the idea like really quickly of doing a series like that would be like what Darwin did with the Parker books, but more about a good guy. And, you know, but that kind of format where you put out like a 140-page book all in one chunk. And I realized, you know, it'd be the equivalent of like 5 or 6 issues of a Marvel comic. And, you know, Sean and I could do that. Like, I realized like we had enough lead time, we could get the first book out this year, and then if we did 2 more right after that, we could get them out, like, you know, the second one could be only like 4 months after the first one, or 3 months after the first one, or something like that. And I just kind of just grabbed a notebook and started jotting down like ideas. It all just kind of, you know, I think the character was someone I'd been toying with in the back of my mind for a long time, with his background and like the Weather Underground and like the other stuff. I don't want to spoil all his twists and turns, but I think that was a character I'd been thinking about for a long time and trying to figure out where to put and what to do with.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely, I mean, you talk about Parker. Parker's kind of, I mean, well, he's an asshole. He's kind of a douchebag. You know what I mean? I mean, I haven't read the novels. I read Darwin's stuff.
Yeah.
And I read it recently. I read the Martini edition.
Oh, yeah.
And I was just like, man, like, I love this book, but like, I can't really like cheer for him, you know?
Yeah, he's uncompromising. Darwin told me when he was like writing letters with Donald Westlake about him, and Westlake always saw him as like, he took his job as seriously as like a plumber takes his job seriously, where it's like, but it's like, if the plumber has to kill you to get you out of the way so he can finish the job, he'll do it. But it's very like a work ethic, and like he doesn't tolerate, like, you know, he's definitely not like Reckless is definitely not a Parker type of character.
Right. He's more of a reluctant hero, I would say, kind of, right?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, he's sort of like part repo man, part detective. Like, the way that he's like Parker is that he is uncompromising in his, you know, like, once he decides what's the just course of action, like, he has no like switch in his mind that will stop him from crossing that line and like getting revenge for, you know, somebody who's done something wrong. So I thought that was like a fun way to sort of play with those archetypes. And, you know, I definitely feel like Reckless is like the postmodern version of those kind of characters, because it's like, it leaves out a lot of the stereotypes, like a lot, especially, a lot of those like men's adventure fiction books from the 60s and 70s are super sexist, and I'm, you know, leaving out all that.
Yeah, oh yeah, that was another thing I did notice in the Parker stuff. But would, like, first of all, I love the name Ethan Reckless. I mean, you come up with some really dope names for your characters.
Oh, thanks.
I mean, like, I know he's kind of, like I said, I feel like he's a reluctant hero, but would you say he leans more towards like the anti-hero archetype? Because while he is somewhat doing good, he's kind of doing bad shit that a regular hero probably wouldn't do, right?
Yeah, he's a vigilante at at best. You know, he's like a person who helps people solve their problems, most of the time things they can't go to the cops for because they did something illegal, you know. So he's kind of, he treads that gray area. I think he legit believes his, you know, his theory. Like he's a guy who, he has kind of an apocalyptic view of the world and that we're all doomed, you know. And this is all like looking at research that was coming public back in the 70s. He's taken that to like the extreme, and he's writing from our present. So he's kind of like vindicated on a lot of this stuff because you can see how the world has gone since the 70s. But like I think he really does literally believe that, you know, like we're all just kind of doomed. And so the best thing that he can do is try to make someone else's life a little bit better for like however small amount of time that he can do it. I think he really like there's some deep streak of humanity in him that sees like the injustice in the world and wants to like right it, even if it just helps one person for like 2 days or a week to have like a slightly better life. It's like, why not? You know.
Yeah.
And I've never written a character like that, really. Like usually my characters are all like sort of these doomed people who you're waiting to see how bad it goes for them.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
it's fun to write someone you could kind of root for, even though there's like a, you know, a bit of a femme fatale twist and involved in everything.
Right.
You know.
I think it's funny that you say like, you know, making someone's life better even for a brief moment with their writing. And I think that that's kind of what writers that write books, like yourself, right? They write comics. You're allowing us as readers for that brief moment of time to kind of escape into this world and kind of ignore all the bullshit, especially with this year, right?
Yeah.
Noticing more that I'm really like able to escape into comic books. It's why I started the YouTube channel. Now I've grown to be able to talk with you guys over Zoom and like really pick your brains a little bit more and kind of immerse myself in this genre that I love so much. And I think it's crazy that you put it that way with Ethan's character and what his kind of motives are and relating it to like what you yourself are doing as a writer.
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought in a way, I think partly out of a defensive nature as like, you know, growing up in the 60s and 70s and 80s as a comic fan, it wasn't the world we have now. It was like you kind of hid it from people, like other kids. You sort of wait to see if other kids still read comics or if they'd grown out of it. Like you definitely didn't want girls to know you read comics. So there's like a little bit of a defensive nature to like my love of serialized fiction. But I always thought, you know, like it's no small thing to like try to entertain people. Like people dismiss it. Like even within comics, there's like other sections of comics that look down on like, you know, mainstream comics or whatever. And it's like, yeah, except, you know, hundreds of thousands of people are reading these things every week and they're getting some form of like escape or the love of their hobby. Like it's so many different things, like comics and just entertaining people. And, you know, you think back to like, there's like several classics of literature that are still taught in schools from hundreds of years ago that were originally just like serialized chapter by chapter in weekly magazines, like Don Quixote or, you know, Three Musketeers, all of Dickens' work, you know. And it's like that idea of serialized fiction, of creating this need for people to want more of these characters and to want to see what happens next. It's like a huge escape from the pressures of real life. And, you know, I found more and more, especially this year, like there are moments where I'm just like, I just need to watch dumb comedies. Like, give me a Harold and Kumar movie. Give me anything Will Ferrell made in the last 10 years. You know, like I've definitely had those moments. And there's been times where like some movie gets released and I'm looking at the description of it and I'm like, I don't know. It doesn't sound like there's going to be any fun in this thing. It's like I found myself really wanting to like, you know, like I want to read fun things. I want to watch fun things. I don't want to be like, you know, I don't want to watch Schindler's List right now.
Definitely not.
We're like living the, you know, the ramifications of all that stuff still. All art reflects our world back at us, but I think sometimes like pop culture escape art reflects it back at us in a way that like lets us have some fun too, you know. Like I think pulp ended up getting delayed and coming out like, you know, sort of, you know, after like all the George Floyd stuff happened, and where there was like way more protesting everywhere. And like, I had no idea when we released the comic that the comic would end up feeling so relevant when it actually came out. But like, I still think Pulp is kind of a fun story in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Like it's a character, you know, examination about a guy, but it's like an ex-outlaw and an ex-Pinkerton teaming up to rob the Nazis. Like, that's fun.
Yes, yes.
You know, while also being like a really depressing story about America.
Yeah. I mean, and you talk about like how art is a reflection of like the world we live in, and Reckless, set in post-Vietnam 70s, right? How
The 70s and early 80s, yeah.
Right. So how would you say that it's paralleling modern times as well with some of the
Well,
things?
I think like because most of the book takes place in 81, and I was like 13 then, I think 13 or 14. And that was my kind of awakening to like larger parts of the world. Like when you become a teenager, you start looking at the news more and sort of taking in things outside your small circle. And I feel like living through the early 80s, especially, there was this very sort of doom and gloom feel to the world. Like everybody, including me, looks back at the 80s as kind of like a heyday for America in a lot of ways. And especially like the political right looks back at the Reagan era, like though they wouldn't recognize like Reagan today, they would think he was like a liberal or something. But I remember at the time we all thought, oh my God, like I was a teenager getting really into punk rock, and you know, it was like, it just felt like everything was really right wing and getting worse and worse. And the Cold War was like raging, and it felt like it was just getting worse. Like I grew up like in school having to do those like get under your desk because there's going to be a nuclear bomb like things. Like that was our like once a month we had to like do the, you know, the special like practice for the nuclear bomb. And nowadays like kids in school have, you know, active shooter drills and stuff. Here's what you would do if there's a shooter. And it's like these worlds reflect each other in a lot of ways, I think. And I feel like sort of the 60s was this, you know, like the way I look at it, having been like a child, it's like the 60s sort of crashed into the 70s and then slowly turned dark throughout the 70s, like politically dark, and the country just sort of changed. And then the 80s hit and everybody kind of reinvented themselves. Like even David Bowie reinvented himself. And the 80s were this slick commercial kind of, you know, it's like half the world felt like Mad Max and the other half felt like MTV, you know, so for me, that really feels like the beginning of like, you know, what today feels like. In a way, that's, you know, that's sort of the last. And yet at the same time, if I could like turn the clock back and have us live through the 80s instead of what we're living through now, I would happily do it.
I would too. This fucking, I mean, I'll just even say it. It's not even just this year. It's been this past 4 years, under the president that we've had. You know, it's just what I've seen our country go through, and like everything. It's just,
yeah, it's a crazy time. This whole century for me, like ever since 9/11, I feel like nothing's totally, you know, felt the same ever since then. Even the Obama years, you know, it just felt like everything was just getting worse and worse, and people were just splitting off into, you know, I blame Facebook mostly.
Yeah, I would say.
I watched that documentary on Netflix.
The Social Dilemma.
Yeah, I watched The Social Dilemma on my social platform, and no, it's like every month there's like a new treatise out about how like social media is basically destroying society and, you know, walling people off. And it's like it's been a crazy century so far. I hope it gets better. The last one got better at some point around the late 40s.
Well,
depending on your definition of better.
Hopefully we don't have to wait another 20 years for the century to kind of make a turn. Hopefully that happens.
There's heydays here and there.
Yeah. I did want to ask though, you know, a lot of your fans, including myself, we love the back matter that's in all of your work.
Yeah.
This is moving more toward, this is going to be an original graphic novel. I know we saw some sketch work, but will we see any back material moving forward possibly?
We'll probably have some extras at the back of all the hardbacks, but not like the articles about other stuff. Like, like it just would feel weird to get to the end of a graphic novel. Like if I got to the end of a mystery novel and there was an article about an old movie, it would seem like, what's this doing?
I guess you're right. Yeah.
So like when I think of it in terms of like the packaging, but I am toying with a couple different ideas for ways to do some, because I miss, like editing that part of the criminal magazines, like putting all the extras together and working with those other writers and seeing what Sean's going to draw. Like, so I want to try and figure out a way to, do some kind of thing that allows me to do that. And I've got a couple plans. I don't want to reveal anything yet, but yeah, I know people really dig that stuff, and I do too. So it's we almost didn't have any extras at the back of Reckless. We had some extra pages, and I felt almost a little bit weird about it. And I thought, well, it's a really nice hardback book. Like, why not have some like art extras and process stuff? And it's nice to see Sean's pencils. Like, we almost never see really pencils out of Sean. But yeah, he's in an interesting phase in his style now. He draws, he does the pencils digitally, and then prints them out in blue line on the artboard, and then inks. And he used to basically barely pencil and just do most of the drawing in the ink. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see some. I mean, I don't know if you're opposed to it, like even some script. Some of your would be cool to see in the back as well. I mean, I love seeing the way writers lay out their scripts, because everybody's different, right? And
yeah, we're talking about doing a special like artist edition of Pulp, where we would have like all the pencils and all the script, and then also the whole the finished book too, so you could compare it to, from beginning to end, and you could see like at that point probably like, because I changed some stuff after the book is lettered. Usually I'll go through and like fix little things here and there, or change like a sentence that I can't stand. So it's interesting to see that process. But yeah, I mean, we love big, expensive art books, as you know.
I buy them all. So I mean, I would absolutely love an artist edition of any of the work that you guys have done. I think that would be awesome. And if you do it, are you planning to do it at like 11 by 17, like in that size?
No, I don't think that size is like. Sean doesn't even draw that size. Like, I think the biggest we would do like an art book would probably be like 8 by 13 or 8 by 12 or something like that, which is pretty close to the size Sean draws. I think he's like 9 by 13 or 10 by 13 or something. I can't remember all the dimensions on that stuff, but I'm just amazed that we got to a place in our career where we can just go straight to like longer graphic novels. Like a couple of years ago when we did the My Heroes Have Always Been Junkies,
right,
that was just like a huge, like we just did it because we wanted the book to exist. We had no idea who would buy it, and it just sort of, after that book came out, and then when Pulp, but in the like year and a half between that and Pulp, like we sort of learned what our readership wanted. And I was like, oh, because I thought like, I mean, you work at a comic store, you see it, it's like when you have like a team like us who's been around forever, and we put out single issues and we put out trades and we put out hardbacks, like our audience was all split off in the different, sections. And like, not everybody wants an oversized hardback. Not everybody wants to buy the single issues. Not everybody who buys the single issues wants the other stuff. But when we put out like a comic book sized hardback, all our different audiences all were like, oh, I'll buy that. Like, so that was really interesting. I was like, oh, I finally found a way to like bring the different people who buy our books together. Like, put them out straight in the format they all prefer. And so, because we talk about that, like trade waiters or waiting for the deluxe hardback people. And it's like, why make them wait? Give them that version first. If everybody that is waiting for that version, why not like put that version out first?
Right. No, I mean, I love it. I don't think I would have the patience to wait. If I hear about you guys dropping a book, like I say this to people all the time. You guys can literally put a book out. I don't need to read the description. I'm just going to buy it. Because you guys have that kind of track record that I know I'm going to love it. I know I'm going to get my money's worth and some every time you guys drop a book. And I I'm just really glad that you guys did it hardcover, not softcover, because if
Yeah.
I had to wait for the hardcover, it would have been really, really difficult for me. And I get the advances of the PDFs.
Oh yeah.
I won't read your work in PDF.
Oh wow.
I wait, like, and I had a couple months ago, I could have read Reckless. I had Pulp for a couple months as well. And I'm like, nope, I gotta wait. I don't want it to ruin my reading experience, because that's part of reading to me.
I worry too. I mean, I think that's a big reason for our success is like guys like you and other comic stores around the country. Like we've just been putting out books for so long that, like, you know, I always said that the people behind the counter, the people who are ringing up the sales, are like your most important fans in a way. Like if you can get them to like what you do, they'll recommend it to other people in their stores. And like I feel like we've been around long enough now. Like I write these like emails to retailers before FOC for books to like point out like things that we're doing, like promotions or book plates or posters or whatever. And like at this point, I'm kind of just trying to remind people, like, remember how well you did with all of our other books. Like, please order this one accordingly. And like Reckless, you know, that's basically what I said to retailers, and their orders for Reckless are like way up above orders for Pulp. And you know, we were worried because the book is twice as long and costs a little bit more, and you know, but yeah, everybody seems to be really responding, and I just kind of feel like we got lucky, because I hear from people all the time that like they'll ask their retailer why there aren't more crime books, and their retailer will be like, "Oh, we only sell Brubaker and Phillips's stuff." Really? And wow, that's amazing, because like were I someone coming up, I'd hate us.
I mean, it's funny because I was talking to my friend Dylan. He works at a different shop out in Thousand Oaks, and he made a crime section, or he was going to make a crime section, and one of his coworkers was like, "Oh, so it's just a Brubaker and Phillips you're doing." And I laughed. I was like, "Well, it's kind of true. You guys have kind of like you have that market. I mean, there is other stuff." But I mean, it's if somebody asks me for a crime or noir, I'm like, Brubaker, here, come here, walk over to their section.
Yeah, we really carved out a niche in comics, I think. And you know, I always just tried to do like what comics I would want to, you know, like you create the thing that you wish existed that someone else was doing, so you could enjoy it. You can't enjoy it when it's your own thing, but but you can enjoy the idea that like, okay, you're creating the industry that you want to exist. And, you know, so the big thing for us, you know, we've just, ever since we started together on Sleeper almost 20 years ago, we just kind of decided we would just keep doing books together until, you know, one of us died probably, or we got too old to keep a schedule. And now it's almost 20 years later. And, you know, I don't think we have the record of the most comics written and drawn by one team, but hopefully we'll have it by the time one of us dies. I mean, we'll ever beat Gru the Wanderer for amount of issues drawn. But yeah, we just kind of stuck it out because we liked doing it, and you know, we just we knew like that it would pay off, you know, in the end if we just kept putting out books and pushing ourselves and trying, you know, whenever we had a success, we tried to do something different with the next book, you know, like. Like Pulp was, you know, Pulp, I had no idea when we started Reckless how Pulp was even going to do, but I remember feeling like the things that I got stuck on in Pulp, or that I was worried about in Pulp, I reacted to in Reckless, because I was like, all right, I would like to do one of these books where I had twice as many pages and I didn't have to try and fit so much story into like 72 pages. And, you know, in the end, I feel like no matter what, if you ever decide like on your page count, you're always gonna about 2/3 of the way through start feeling like you don't have enough room left, no matter how many pages you give yourself. But you know, I always think we just try and, you know, keep putting out books that, you know, we would want to see. Like, I don't think either of us ever feels like we've really like landed. Like, I feel like, you know, like I looked back when we put out Junkies, and I looked at the page at the back that listed all of our books. And that was like one of the first moments in like 10 years that I'd really thought about how much work we'd been doing, because I'm always just like hoping the next thing will be bigger than whatever thing we did before, or that this will be the one that finally, you know, breaks through to like bookstores or whatever. And it's interesting, you meet, when I do like signings or tours or whatever, you meet so many different readers and they all have a different favorite. Like that store Froman's in Pasadena, like I guess for a couple of years now, like The Fade Out has been their best-selling graphic novel because it's like a Hollywood graphic novel, and they have the trade paperback always in stock or always on their like recommended shelf. And you know, I met the buyer there, and I remember going there like 5 years ago, and they didn't have any of my books. And so it's like, it's always the buyers, it's always the guy behind the counter. Like those are the people that you need to get to read your books. Like in the early days, I used to send out like a mail out for criminal, like myself, like me and my friends, Duffy and Caitlin and my wife and I would like print out posters, and I'd sign like thousands of letters and stuff envelopes and take them out and mail them all out to people to try to get them to order our books.
Oh wow, man, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. Some stores used to auction off the signed letter, which is like embarrassing. It's like, this is me begging you to order my book.
That's hilarious. Well, I was gonna kind of ask like how you guys stay so invigorated and like this, like you guys are always seems like you guys are doing something exciting and that you're excited about the work you're producing, you know, and it comes through in every single project that you guys come out with, even when I mean, pulp mixes Western, right? Like it's straightforward Western.
Sean wanted a Western, and I wrote a thing about an old man in the Depression instead. But it has a Western vibe. It's like,
no, it does.
Yeah, it's like The Unforgiven for like Butch and Sundance.
Yes.
Like they were because Butch and Sundance, that era of detective or that era of outlaw, like the turn of the century kind of outlaws, or like Tom Horn, or there's like so many Wild West outlaws that were around at sort of the end of the West and when cars were coming in and stuff. And that always fascinated me. But yeah, I think at some point when we were working on Fatale, I stopped like looking at like sales figures or anything. And I just decided that the only way to do our books, it was like right around the time that I worked out the overall deal with Image where we could just do whatever we wanted. Because I realized like, I was doing my best work when I didn't have to worry about trying to tell someone why it was going to be a commercial idea or why it was going to be like a hit or whatever. It was like, I just did my best work when it was just me trying to write something that Sean wouldn't hate drawing, you know, and me sort of, because often I would plan on something. And then when I got to the early stages of working on it, I realized like, I don't want to do this. Like everybody has like all these different impulses in their head, but like when you're a writer, especially in the early days when we were first publishing, like I was like desperate for Criminal to be a hit. We launched Criminal at like the height of our like whatever comic book fame. Like I had just done The Death of Captain America, which sold like 1 million copies. And Sean had just done Marvel Zombies with Robert Kirkman, which sold like 1 million copies. So our names would never have been bigger in the minds of comic book people. And we go off and do like this straight crime thing. And, you know, it became like, basically like a sleeper hit for us that when we always come back to it. But it was really just like, I don't care what, you know, what will sell. I want to try and like make us the thing that's the brand, because, you know, that way we'll be able to do whatever we want, you know. So it's always just about that, like following the impulse. Like when you start actually working on it, because once Sean starts drawing something, like that's it, we're going to be doing it, you know? Like, so it's like that up until the moment where I'm sending him like script pages, I'll often have like doubts. There's like 2 times now where I've set something aside and decided to do something else. Instead, like Kill or Be Killed, I was about to do something and it just didn't feel quite right. Like it was something that I realize now needs to be a graphic novel and not like serialized in comics and then collected, because the story will just work way better if you don't have to wait a month between chapters. And so that's one that, you know, we'll probably do in the next couple of years at some point. But yeah, this is like 2 times where I've been like ready to start something, and then just in the early stages of it, it just feels like something's just off. Like it's not the thing that I need to be writing at that moment. And then I just find the thing, like Kill or Be Killed came together in like half an hour, like the basic idea of the whole thing and the arc of it. And, you know, I called up a couple friends to tell them, you know, to bounce the idea off them and see if they thought it was stupid or if it made sense. And, you know, and then that ended up being like our biggest success ever until Reckless. So, And Reckless was another one of those where it's like I was about to do something, and then I just thought, what would be the thing that if I were one of our readers, like would be the most mind-blowing like thing I could announce next that would be like, holy shit. And I was like, well, we'll have a graphic novel out. Hopefully people will like it. And then we're also like right after that one comes out announcing that we're doing this whole series of graphic novels.
Yeah.
And you know, like and that we're sort of doing like a different kind of pulp comic, you know, like I always use that city of Santa Teresa, which is from Ross McDonald, but like a bunch of crime writers have used that as it's a fake Santa Barbara, because that's where Lou Archer lived, and he didn't, you know, he wanted to just be able to talk about his neighbors without talking about them, I guess. But like a lot of crime fiction has like references to these sort of fictional cities that various writers have made up over the years. And so like I use that in Reckless, but at the same time I was thinking it's not totally the same world as Criminal. Like it's more over the top. It's a little bit more, you know, right and wrong, good and bad. Like there's a ton of gray in it, but definitely like the violence is way more over the top than I think anything we do in Criminal, really.
Yeah, there was a couple of moments where I was shocked. I think I flipped the page and I was like, what the fuck? I think
we have a sword fight.
You know, I said it out loud, so I was like, what the fuck is going on right now?
Yeah, I had to watch a lot of sword fight like stuff to get like good reference. But yeah, no, it's really, it's been a lot of fun, and just the idea of like creating a character that sort of plays with all of those like pulp stereotypes and can kind of twist them around. You know, one of my best friends is this writer, Sarah Gran, who does this amazing series of detective novels about this world's greatest detective, Claire DeWitt, who's like a grown-up. Her and her friends were like 3 kid detectives together because they found like this crazy French book that's like an existentialist thing about being a detective. But they're just the most fun books, and at the same time, like I envy them. Like all the time when I'm reading them, I'm like, oh man, I wish I was this clever. And I talk to her about serious fiction a lot, and we always talk about like how it kind of just allows you to go deep into these characters. Like you've got a plot you're following, but whatever story they're on, it's really about them. And like, especially for the first book in Reckless, so much of it was, it's really about him, you know. In the second book, which I'm almost done writing right now, and Sean's like pretty close to finishing drawing, he'll be like a week behind me. Like that one is much more of a, like, I'm working on a case. But even that, it's like you're seeing how that like sort of affects the detective. And one of the things I really wanted to do with the series too was like all the books don't take place close after the previous one. Like the second book opens in 1985.
Oh wow, okay.
The first book is all like mostly 1981. So it's like 4 years later. So it's like, because I always figured there's just no way, if you're a real private eye, like I've talked to several private eyes in my life, and most of their work is boring. Like mostly they're not working like interesting cases, but every now and then they like get some guy off of a murder rap that, you know, because they find some evidence that the police didn't find or something. Like every now and then there's something exciting, but also there's like years of just knocking on doors and talking to people, you know, like, or just sitting in a car, like peeing in a big gulp, you know, like waiting for someone to leave a house and get into a car. Like there's so much downtime. So I just was like, I want to be able to like look back at the world I lived through and sort of take this character and like watch him change with these cases and see how they affect him.
This next book is, you said 85. So
yeah,
will you still like maybe jump back sometimes, or is it only going to go in a linear fashion moving forward?
Right now I'm just thinking in terms of like linear, like the book, I think the third book takes place a couple years after the second one. Okay. But I do have ideas for, you know, going back to like the 70s even, and, you know, even like Anna, his sidekick character, I've thought about doing like a spin-off.
I like her.
Yeah, I think she's really cool. Yeah, in
really
the
cool,
second book, she's a DJ out at Santa Monica.
Love it.
Yeah, she's got a little bit more of a mod look going on then. But yeah, that was another thing about doing the book. Like I'm such a, like when I was a kid in the like in the mid 70s, we moved to San Diego, and then my dad got out of the military not long after that. So I lived a couple different places after that, but most of my youth from like age 8 or 9 on was like Southern California. And when I was in high school, we would go up to LA to see punk shows and go to like places that aren't there anymore, basically. Or like even in Reckless, there's the old version of Hugo's Tacos in Studio City.
Yeah.
Like that was like, I remember going there when I was a kid. We would come up to LA and go there and go to like Okie Dog, or just these places that aren't there anymore that are part of like old LA. Or like in the second book, like the first chapter takes place in the old Santa Monica Library, which isn't there anymore. So it's like, in a way, like when we're doing these books, I'm able to sort of take this old LA culture and try to bring it into our work a little bit. And, because I really want him to feel like that kind of, slacker surf punk detective.
Yeah.
I tried very hard to get Sean to put a logo on the surfboard at the end, but it just didn't look right. But it was like one of the surfboards from the Dogtown and Z Boys.
Nice.
It was going to be one of those like Zephyr surfboards.
That would have been cool.
A total Venice guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, in the second book, there's also like the old versions of like bars and restaurants. Like I'm just tracking down as much like historical reference as I can get. So, to make it really feel like, LA, or there's just something about LA and Southern California in general that's just, you almost have to live there to really get it. And when people make fun of it, like on SNL, when they'll do like the Californians and they're all just talking driving directions, I'm like, yeah, but that's an interesting conversation if you live in LA. Someone just explained how to cut 5 minutes off your drive to West Side.
Yeah. That's hilarious.
I loved having like an entire page of driving directions in Reckless. Yeah. Like, this is how you get from LA to Santa Rosa.
Yeah, it definitely has those LA vibes, man. I have to say, it definitely captures LA perfectly. It definitely.
Yeah, and Sean and Jake have only been in LA like one time. So they took a ton of photo reference, but I sent both of them a lot of reference. Of course, LA now, as opposed to LA in like 1981 or the 70s, LA's
it's way different
now. Like, like California in general. I'm like, it used to be more green. I like sent them photo reference from like Terrence Malick movies from the 70s.
And then I wanted to ask, before we get out of here, is there any other projects that you're working on that you can talk about, or maybe just tease a little bit?
Just Friend of the Devil, trying to finish up Friend of the Devil, and outlining the third Reckless book, which is going to be called Destroy All Monsters, and just trying to stay ahead of Sean and Marcos. I'm writing the fourth chapter, I think, of Friday. Yeah, I'm writing the fourth chapter of Friday, and Marcos is deep into drawing the third chapter on that. And I'm just working on a couple TV projects that I can't talk about besides that, but just really focusing on, being able to get these 3 graphic novels out in under 1 year. Like, I think the third book will be out in October. So yeah, in 12 months, we'll have released 3 full-length graphic novels, which is insane.
It's amazing. I love it.
Yeah, I didn't really start feeling it until about a month ago. And then I'm just like, because Sean's been drawing 7 or 8 pages a week for months now.
Oh shit. Oh, that's a lot.
It's insane, like the schedule we're keeping up. And I was ahead of him on both books when we started. And now I'm just like, every week it's just make sure I can stay ahead of Sean, and and that when we're done with this one, I'll be able to get far enough ahead on the next book. So it's like, I loaded my schedule up a lot with stuff. I have another comic project that my friend Hallie Gross and I were going to write together for like one of my favorite artists. And we've basically delayed that for a while because we just don't have the bandwidth to jump onto it yet.
Right.
But my friend Hallie and I worked on Westworld together, and she worked on the show that I created with Nicholas Refn for Amazon. And but she also was one of the 2 lead writers for Last of Us 2, the video game.
Oh wow,
I'm
okay.
trying to get her into comic book writing because she's just got too many good ideas.
Nice, man. I can't wait
to get out of that grind. Get into the comic book grind.
Yeah. And then real quick, I did want to ask about Friday. I forgot to ask you about Friday. I know it's serialized online. When can we expect a collection in print?
We're gonna probably collect it like in the first big Friday book breaks down into acts. Like when you get to the end of chapter 3, you'll see it's like a big kind of oh shit moment. So I think the talk right now is we'll collect each act as like a trade paperback, and then maybe put out like a big oversized hardback collection of the whole thing when it's done, because we don't know how many pages it's going to be. Like, because Marcus and I both just keep adding pages every chapter. Like I'll give him a script for something that's supposed to be like 34 pages or 35 pages, and he'll turn it into 40 pages.
Oh shit.
So yeah, but yeah, and he doesn't want to keep like hard deadlines on it because he's publishing it on the platform. But so I think we'll have the first collection out probably in the summer from Image, and I think that's going to be a really great crossover for the young adult market, because
yeah, it's an awesome story. I loved it.
Yeah, I call it post YA, but a bunch of friends of mine have pointed out that's just A. That's just A. That's just adult. And also, there is no such thing as post YA.
I mean, I like that. Post YA
it because it
cool.
sort of implies it's like, yeah, but she's a grown-up YA character,
right?
But someone pointed out to me that like I stopped reading YA books. You know, I haven't really read any that were published after like the 70s. And back then, like they had to skirt around talking about stuff. But like The Hunger Games is a YA book, and it's about like murder and sex.
Yeah.
You know, and the apocalypse. Like YA books have really, you know, like 50 Shades of Grey is like you know, is basically a riff on Twilight, which is a YA series,
right?
a sex book. So like YA books really encompass a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you know, Friday was one of those things too where it just, you know, it fell together really quick. Marcos asked me if I had any ideas for him, and I just looked at like a bunch of his art because I've just always loved what he did, and I just thought, what's something he's never done that I would love to see him do, and I just bounced a bunch of ideas off of him, and he just loved it. And you know, the next day I started writing the first chapter because I was like, all right, I gotta jump on this before he finds someone else to work with.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's cool, and I can't wait to see it in print and be able to recommend it to all the people at the shop. And so I wanted to thank you so much for taking time. I know you are a very, very busy man, but it is always a privilege to be able to chat with you. Before we leave, though, I was wondering if you could share where people can find you. Well, I know you're not on social media.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Maybe just share how people can sign up to your awesome newsletter. And
oh shit! Yeah, how do people sign up to that? Search online for my newsletter through. I think I don't know. I used to have like a Twitter that I had like the link up on, but yeah, I don't have Twitter anymore.
I don't blame you.
I never had Facebook. Yeah, I do a newsletter. If you search, I believe if you just search Basement Gang newsletter or From the Desk of Ed Brubaker.
Okay.
Just do a Google search on that. It'll show
I'll find that, and I'll drop the link down below.
Yeah,
I mean, I signed up a long time ago, so I don't remember.
Yeah, I've had to sign up for it a couple times because I want to make sure it sends every time, and sometimes I'll forward it to someone, and then they go sign up for it and unsigns me up because they've used my forwarded thing.
Oh,
like,
okay.
All those, yeah, it's so weird. So I've been unsigned from my own newsletter like 5 times. God damn it, what's happening? But yeah, that's pretty much. I put out the newsletter every month or two, with like updates on stuff that we're working on and like links to articles that I think are really weird crime stories or really funny crime stories or really tragic crime stories. Often I'll answer like reader emails about like writing questions, and I'm slowly but surely putting my sort of unofficial history of my own sort of comics education chapter by chapter, but I don't do one of those every month because they're too hard.
Yeah,
But I'm
don't
trying
blame
to,
you.
eventually I want to have enough of those that I can have like a book of those put together.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
It's an interesting form doing like newsletters. I try to make sure they're not too long, but also like not too much just like spam. Because every time you send one out, like 10 people unsubscribe. And like I used to look at the reasons, and after 2 people said spam, I was like, oh God, maybe that's true. I try really hard to make sure they're not spam.
Yeah, I love them. I mean, I love getting insight into your writing. I love getting recommendations, which you also share in there, which are
yeah, I recommend a lot of different stuff. And
so I highly recommend it, and I will drop the link below. And again,
yeah,
thank you so much.
well, thanks for having me. This was fun.
Yeah, man. I'd love to do this for the next book of Reckless if you're up for it.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. It comes out in April.
All right, cool, man. All right, man. Well, have a good one, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, man.